You remember what your dad did for a living?
Oh, let me tell you. He was from a 13 kiddos family in Kentucky. Back then, the farms were such that they had to have the big families because they didn't have all the fancy equipment that we have now.
Right.
But these boys, as they got old enough, left home. My dad's big brothers, Green and Sherm, had already left. As soon as they could save up enough money, they always put it in their shoes so that when they traveled by train, if they went to sleep, nobody could get their extra money. But they'd travel as far as they could with their money and then find a farm that would let them do the labor, live in their barn, and be fed. So after the 4th grade, my dad tried that, and he was following along behind. But first he lived with an older sister that had kids already, and then from there he and Les, the younger one, saved their money, rode the train, and finally they got to where the older two were in Oklahoma. It was when the oil fields were being discovered. And back then they needed roughnecks, so it didn't matter whether you were an Indian or Hebrew. And so the older fellows had gotten on as roughnecks at some of the oil companies. Well, when Dad got there, he got a job. I don't know whether it was that or not because he helped at a grocery store for a while, but he had to sleep under the table where they ate in this little place where the older brothers lived. So then he was working for a company there, and back then the oil companies had oil field camps. We had, in 1927, a home furnished, and it was a small company that my daddy worked for, and they were from California. So they bought 38 acres in Texas, and they sent my dad, family, house, car, post office box, to the East Texas oil field. And they knew so little about it, the people that owned it, that when they would come from California, they'd pump my dad for information because he'd learned this from the 4th grade on.
Right.
And so through the years, they drilled 18 wells there, and we had access, transportation. Phones weren't available till the 40s. But anyway, with that kind of background, they were there, by the way, for 50 years. And these wells also had the pumps with them because you never knew whether you were in the shallow part of the district, and you might be pumping in a year or two. But all those facilities had the pumps, and so I used that cement around the edge for a skating rink.
You remember the name?
Yes, the petroleum company, just a common little thing.